Winnipeg Park as well. And I feel like we're a long ways away from it right here. This is better. Anyways, thank you for that glowing introduction, Martin. Thank you as an audience for believing in it. Because, I discovered that when somebody asks you for a bio, you can write whatever you want. So I do. I actually once wrote that I was a Pulitzer Prize winner for my autobiography, Life and Repeat Novelle co-written with Don Cherry and Paris Hilton. People came up after and believed it, so I won't be speaking of Prince Rupert here. Not the Christmas chips and bag that I've been drinking up there. Now, I appreciate all those positions that were mentioned, and we didn't talk about Rob Seeley's positions, and that Rob Seeley, the SEAL, as we call him, is from Saskatoon, and he's actually held a few positions as well. Lithotomy is his favorite. He's held that for a couple of hours at one particular time. That's Dr. Seeley. We'll hear from him in a minute. But we have to say that we love traveling across Canada because wherever we go, there's a certain sense of pride. I just love Canada. This is my kind of country here. But there's a certain sense of pride that each city or town has about their place, and they usually exhibit it on a sign. And you remember Edmonton started this off years ago. They had a big sign, Edmonton, welcome to Edmonton, the city of champions, which just irritated the rest of the country, of course. But that was a long time ago, and they've had a dry spell. And now they changed their sign. It says, welcome to Edmonton, we have the big mall, but we have no winners. And Calgary's has never changed over the years. It just says, welcome to Calgary, we hate Edmonton. And it goes on from there. For Winnipeg, almost heaven, we can see paradise from here. Saskatoon, we can see Winnipeg from here. Of course, Vancouver is yes, we cannabis. And Toronto is said that we're everything that we're cracked up to be. Even if our Fords don't run on all the cylinders. Now, up in Whitehorse, they just hand out a brochure, because up in Whitehorse, the men outnumber the women 10 to 1. So they just hand out a brochure to the women. It says, ladies, welcome to Whitehorse, but before entering our city, please realize that the odds are good, but the goods are odd. And of course, Hamilton, well, they just have a picture of this guy. That's all they have of Hamilton at all. You go into St. John, New Brunswick, and there's a big happy sign, because St. John, New Brunswick has been voted the happiest city in Canada by, the happy city voting people. And that's interesting, but the most unhappy city in Canada is Victoria, British Columbia, where we're from. And we can't figure it out either. We think it has something to do with giving women the right to vote last year or something. We're not sure. We're not happy. And Victoria is it's a very laid-back town because it's, I would say this sensitively here, because it's somewhat chronologically challenged. And I appreciate that here we have the Silver Reflection Symposium. In Victoria, it's like, carbon-14 dating symposium. It's completely different thing. By the way, this is the sign for Victoria. This is how we know you're in Victoria to get there. And many of you will move to Victoria, and you're going to know when is the time to go to Victoria, because the focus of your conversation will center around the state of your bowels. And when that happens, and your hair, which normally grows out of your head, turns around and goes back through your skull, where it creates memory loss, and then emerges daintily out your ears, your nose, and your eyebrows. And not just the women. Men too are going to get this overwhelming urge to let down their hair. And when I say their hair, I mean their hair. And they just go wild and they become beach bums. I have to say that this is a and it just ruins my old relaxing days at the beach here. So even though Victoria is an older town, they believe that they're younger, and they like to do certain things with the younger people. And for a doctor, that creates all kinds of interesting medical injuries to show up in our little ER. We get a lot of them like this, and they end up in our pediatric ward, for example. Here's our pediatric ward, and It's a fun place to work, obviously. It says laughter is the best medicine. I don't think she's laughing. I think she's done. I think her daughter's laughing. She's just got the wheel in her hand and she's laughing. But here's another, for example, typical Victorian injury that this man is about to incur. This is what I think is where optimism meets opportunism. It's optimistic here. Now, as people age, we find as physicians that they tend to open up to you more in ways that you just never dreamt were possible. But we can deal with all sorts of people. And I've sort of developed programs at our hospital that for some people, as they get older, they get a little more cranky, and they get quite cranky. And I find that if I take them back to games of their youth, their childhood, that it helps. And so I do. If they're really particularly nasty, I'll take them back to, for example, hopscotch is what I like to do. And do that as well. So, all right, we're going to make this an interactive evening here, so make sure if you've got comments or you can screen for tomatoes to throw in, whatever it is, feel free to interact with us here. I'm going to turn the time over to Dr. Sid. He's one of the funniest guys I know on TV. We've had this Wisecracks now for several years, and it's more fun because of him. It's a lot of fun because of him. He's a fascinating guy. His wife, who's not here with him, not with him, she's a very articulate and attractive and intelligent woman, which just proves that opposites do attract. Well, very well.
I never know what he's going to say, and I always cringe. It's nice to have a warm-up back, though, isn't it? Thank you very much. I'm obviously a man that needs no introduction. Nobody will give me one, but that's the usual thing. But it's great being here in Kidnap. Dave tricked me, though. He told me that we're going to get a kitty cat, and lo and behold, we ended up here in Kidnap. But, we came up here today, and I looked around and thought, I've got a feeling I've been here before. And I pulled up, and sure as heck, there were some people that recognized me. I must have been a small kid, but they obviously recognized me and welcomed me back. But thanks for having us at the Silver Symposium. I thought it was a mining expedition, but it's nice to be here. We are family practitioners in Victoria, and I've been doing it for 23 years now. And you can imagine after 23 years of family practice, I don't think of my patients as just patients anymore, but rather survivors in my practice. But Dave and I, we've been doing this for a while. We've been Wisecracks on the radio, we've done various things, and in case some of you are wondering, Dave actually has written a book, The Doctor is Insane. It's at the back of the room there. A lot of people ask, what's it about? And quite commonly I'll say it's about $20. So I will get out to sign it. It drives me crazy when I do this, but I will definitely sign any copy that you purchase. In fact, it's up to me, it's $10. But I was very happy to announce that just last week some exciting news. It was up for Stephen Leacock Medal of Humor. That's not what was exciting, he lost miserably. But the fact that it doubled in sales, his mom bought 2 copies, so it's doing quite well. So tonight, you probably saw, we're going to teach you, actually there's some medical knowledge that's going to come out of here tonight, believe it or not. And we're going to teach you how to die young at an old age. And there's, originally we were going to do the topic, the fact that there's 100 ways to live to 100, and we only came up with 1. So we changed the topic, and that's happiness. So, first of all, I'm going to talk to you about the science of optimism versus pessimism. Okay, so it's the old half glass full or half glass empty. Now, most of the optimists do much, much better than the crowd, and that's for a variety of reasons, because generally they're under less stress, they have better coping skills. They tend to be more active, they follow a good diet, they tend to not smoke, they tend not to drink as much as their physician, and they actually follow our directions. So what do optimists have to benefit? Well, they have lower rates of anxiety, lower rates of depression, even their immune system is boosted. These are all studies that have shown us they fight off the common cold. There's lymphocytes go up, natural killer cells, all these different things that they teach us in medical school. Pessimists don't have those things. So even fighting off colds, maybe not a man cold, nothing to teach the immune system how to fight that sucker off. But what about things like stroke? Well, in the Journal of Stroke, they did this huge study and looked at people's optimism score. It's actually a 16-point optimism score. And they followed these people over time. For every point of optimism, there was a 9% reduced risk of stroke. So that's pretty significant, whereas the pessimists, that never happened. They were more likely to have stroke. Now again, it's partly because of the biological immune system, but also because of the lifestyle changes that are positive outcome. What about cardiovascular disease? Well, a huge study, 100,000 women over an 8-year period. They looked at their personality testimony, and they found that those women that had a more optimistic outlook, more laughter, less stress, they had less inflammation in the blood vessel walls, so less plaque buildup. There was a 30% reduced risk of cardiovascular disease. Now, as you can imagine, if the opposite was true, you had a heart attack, there was a 40% increased chance you're going to be angry and hostile. Now, if I had chest pain, I don't think I'd be laughing, so that's not too surprising. There was another interesting study in the Journal of Heart, and it looked at circulation. I love these kind of obscure studies, and this is what we used to talk about on the radio all the time. I love, the bizarre stuff. But they took these people, I wonder how much money they spent on this, by the way, but they took half the crowd, and they subjected them to the movie Saving Private Ryan. Remember this one? Pretty stressful, lots of stuff going on in that movie versus Something About Mary. And although Tom Hanks was good for his platoon, he wasn't good for the circulation. In fact, Cameron Diaz boosted the people's circulation in their arm and blood flow through the arm by 50%. And through this, they've actually extrapolated that if you laugh 100 times per day, it's equivalent to about 20 minutes of exercise up in the aerobics center. So I would just stay at home, sit on the couch, and laugh. In fact, they've even gone so far as to say that laughter is equivalent to about 10 milligrams of Lipitor. How many people here are on atorvastatin and Lipitor for cholesterol? Right? Laugh it off. Get rid of that stuff. Now, how many people have ever been sent to a gelotologist? I mean, there's a specialty for everything in medicine. Did anyone know what a gelotologist is? You can only guess, right? It's a science of laughter. There are research around the world with these gelotologists that look to see if laughter truly is the best medicine. Which, by the way, if you've got something like an abscess, it's not the best medicine. I would stick maybe to penicillin. But in Japan, the Japanese gelists, they looked at type 2 diabetes. And what they did is they took a group of people, they went out to this great big meal and had a great big full stomach. Half of them went home and checked their blood sugars. The other half they took out to a comedy club. Now, obviously they don't do stand-up comedy in Japan, but they measured their blood sugar afterwards, and their blood sugar was significantly lower. Same meal, just a touch of laughter. So we're going to put the pharmaceutical industry in. Thankfully, they're not sponsoring this evening. But now, what about lifespan? Well, optimists live longer. There's a 23% less chance that you'll die from cancer. There was a really interesting study in the Journal of Thoracic Oncology that looked at a very severe lung cancer. And the people that they followed over a 20-year period up until their diagnosis, not how they reacted to their diagnosis, but how they lived their lives up to the 20 years prior to their diagnosis, those that had a more brighter personality, more optimistic, they lived 6 months longer than the people that were more pessimistic. And you say 6 months isn't long, but the actual diagnosis was a terminal illness of less than a year. So they had a 50% increase, and that's quite impressive. Now, in my practice, there's lots of evidence that I can see this anecdotally. I can think of a number of people that think positively even when they're faced with very severe diseases that we have to deal with. I can just think, too, we see some people, the pessimistic, that come in with a list of issues, and week after week, and they're just missing out on the fact that, day-to-day stuff, they could carry on and be more brighter versus other people that, deal with very terminal illnesses. When I think about it, I think of this one patient, her name was Linda Murray. Well, that's not really her name. Her name is Betsy Fitzpatrick, but I can't say that because of confidential reasons. But let's say Linda, she used to come to my office all the time. She had tons of problems, but she didn't seem to be bothered by them. And she would just kind of laugh a lot. The problem is, every time she laughed, her bladder would withhold laughter. She had kind of a leaky bladder syndrome. year after year after year. And I kept trying to suggest that she should maybe get this fixed, and certainly my secretary and the cleaning staff wished she would get it fixed. So eventually she said, okay, Rob, just to appease you, I'll go and get this bladder surgery. So she went and got it done. I remember the surgeon called me up and said, Rob, I'm going to be out of town next week. Would you please check her out the following week to make sure that the surgery was successful? Okay, so she comes back in my office the next week, and she gets up in the stirrups in the position, and this leaking is happening. Oh my goodness. And finally talked to me to the surgery, and it didn't work. And it's starting to pour between her legs. Next thing you know, it's hitting me in the chest. I'm kind of in a trapped position. Thankfully, I had my safety glasses on. And next thing that happened is literally it was just gushing. And I didn't want to embarrass her, but at that moment I saw her legs were shaking. I thought, what? And I looked up and she had a water pistol. So that's the kind of patients I attract. It's an absolute true story. So as physicians, we have to give patients sometimes diagnoses that are not all that good, but if we can give them some degree of hope, these patients certainly seem to do better. So if you happen to be a person that's looking at life with your glass half full, my suggestion is maybe just get a bigger glass. So how many people here are hooked up to Wi-Fi? You know what Wi-Fi is? Matt, are you hooked up to Wi-Fi? How many people are hooked up to the Wi-Fi right now? Actually, all of you are hooked up to Wi-Fi right now. That's a trick question. Because the Wi-Fi that we think about back in the early 1990s, it got computers working and smartphones working. At the same time, in 1992, Italian researchers came across the fact that we all have Wi-Fi's up in our brains. And how they figured this out was actually really, really interesting. What they did is they took micro-thin electrodes and they put them on single neurons of monkey brains. And what they were trying to find out was map out of the brain. They'd scan these monkeys through a functional MRI machine and look to see what part of the brain was responsible for whatever action. So when a monkey went to reach for a banana, a certain part of the brain would light up. Well, it was one day, totally by accident, there was an Italian researcher that came back to the lab late from lunch. He was eating an ice cream cone. I said it would be a gelato in Italy, but he was eating this ice cream cone. And this monkey was watching it. And there was a portion of the brain lit up. And the researcher went back the next day and had another gelato and the same thing. So he kept repeating this experiment. And that's when he found out, they realized that simply by watching other people, we can have a similar response. We can have a physical response. An example of this is when we kick a ball, and then we hear somebody say it to us, kick. That part of the brain goes off. Or if we smell cinnamon one day and we read it in the book cinnamon, we get that aroma. So this tells us that we can establish a connection with people wirelessly, and we can affect how they respond to their emotions. It's very strong, simply by watching other people, and we can actually make laughter contagious. In fact, the British Medical Journal did some study, and they found out that laughter is actually infectious, contagious, and 15% of the people will raise their happiness quotient. So, another interesting experiment in India, in Mumbai, India, there was a number of people that were trespassing across the rail yards and were getting hit by the trains. They had these signs up everywhere, people would literally jump over them to run across the tracks. It wasn't until they put these signs up, because they frightened emotions, totally stopped people, I shouldn't say this, but in the tracks. And it didn't happen anymore. And this just shows you that our emotions and how we watch other people. And there's a Tibetan saying, when you smile at life, half the smile is for your face, and half the smile is for everybody else's. Louis Armstrong, what was his big music like? When you're smiling, the whole world's smiling at you. There's another experiment that I have found in my office, and I certainly see this in medical students that come on trains in my office as well. And that's when students come in, or pardon me, patients come in, and they have a sore throat. What do they do to us? They usually have a very hoarse voice, and they whisper to us. We respond back by whispering in quiet tones. Try this with somebody. If you realize that too, when a patient comes in and they have very aggressive, we get very defensive. There's this hostility that builds up. If you identify that and diffuse it, you can really make a change in what's happening in your environment. An experiment that I've done repeatedly I call it the road rage experiment. What I do is I purposely, this is great in downtown Vancouver, by the way, purposely cut somebody off and watch for their response. Usually they wave at me, but they don't use all their fingers. It's just this gesture. And I will turn around and I will blow them a kiss. And it's amazing, 9 times out of 10, it'll absolutely stop them in their tracks. I've had people laugh. I've had one person blow me a kiss back. I got his number. I would not try this maybe in Texas or Prince George. But psychologists say that the shortest distance between two brains causes an infectious spread that builds an instant social bond is laughter. And that's true. If you think yourself when you're in an elevator or you're at the bank lineup, and everybody's got that uncomfortable, all you got to do is crack something or make a noise, whatever. But it doesn't help to fake that emotion. How many times have you been on an airplane and the flight attendant saying bye-bye and things, we call that the Pan Am smile. There's an actual medical term for this. And it's kind of this, pasted on smile. It's also called the Botox smile. In this case, only the muscles around the mouth barely in the Botox smile wrinkle up. And that's, you can tell there's a fake emotion. Whereas a true smile, you'll see the crow's feet around the eyes. And that is when you know someone's being genuine. That's, by the way, called a Duchenne smile, named after the neurologist. Now, an extreme example of how important an emotion is the media syndrome. It's named after Dr. Syndrome. In 1888, he was a neurologist. But media syndrome are people that are genetically born without the ability to smile. And this harms them greatly. They are thought of as having less intelligence. They certainly seem to be disinterested. They don't do well in society. So emotions are very important to how we communicate. Anybody here ever heard of somebody having a gelastic seizure? Now, if you remember what I said what a gelotologist was, there's actually seizures that occur at a part of the brain. They're often a benign part of the hypothalamus, a hamartoma. 1 in a million, it will cause uncontrollable laughter. It's outbursts of uncontrollable laughter. Now, half the time I think he's got it, but it literally is this uncontrollable laughter, which if you think about it, that sounds kind of funny, but if you're at an event, funeral, or what have you, it's not really what you're looking for. Very, very rare. I actually have one in our clinic, and I wish there was more of this audience going forward. I'm going to hand it back over to Mr. Dr. Bailey.
Someone is thanking those of you who've been very helpful with us tonight. Margaret, Martin, Megan, which really sounds like a troubadour group. Martin, Megan, Peter Paul, and the rest of them. And Nigel, Dominic, and Shane. Where's Shane? O'Neill, right?
Sean.
Brian?
Yes.
Sean. Okay, Susan. Comes up to me in the gym and says, weren't you the guy that played in the Guinness Book of Records game? Hockey game back in 2002. You got to be kidding me. How do you remember that? I said, yeah, you were the second highest scoring defenseman. Right there. But honestly, somebody remembers that game. Yeah, how many years ago was that? Anyways, what I'm going to talk about briefly here, or somewhat, is the fact that we talk about how to enjoy living to 100 rather than endure living to 100. And, we are, as physicians, we are experts, not necessarily in happiness, but we're experts in unhappiness. Because we see people who are unhappy. They come to see us, they're not happy, they're unhappy about pain or depression or inconvenience of being there or bad diagnosis or whatever. It's what we see. People come in seldom and they say, doctor, I feel just so good that I need a depressant. It doesn't happen. Seldom they come in and say, my sinuses are fine, my bowels are working, my skin is clean, I'm going to Maui and want to come. That doesn't happen. And so, by virtue of the fact what we do as physicians, we are unhappyologists. And it turns out that the happiest people, it has been shown, are those who have discovered and have exercised and have nourished what is known as your signature strengths. I'm going to talk about this for a minute. It's very important that you learn to recognize, build, and to develop and to practice your signature strengths rather than trying to constantly correct your signature weaknesses. You know, we always know what our weaknesses are. We always think, I gotta make that better, I gotta do this. But no, it's actually better not to worry about that, but to spend more time being absolutely fulfilled by exercising what your signature strengths are. I'll reflect that in a second. But first of all, you know, a superficial, pleasant life may involve something like driving a Porsche, or drinking champagne, or traveling to places like Brazil, which may not be the experience that you thought it was going to be. But we can remain stuck in this sort of superficial phase where we try to sort of put together passing pleasure after passing pleasure and call that a happiness, and it really truly is not. The key is to discover and to nourish and to exercise what are your signature strengths for the benefit not just for yourself, but of those around you. And signature strengths, by virtue of what they are not meant to personally benefit you. They are not meant to diminish others either. It is not the same as a talent. A talent may be something like, you know, fast and very speedy. You can run like this, you have perfect pitch, or you're extremely handsome. Those we can't help. Those are basically talents. We can do nothing about that. Signature strengths are things that you can develop. And we can be in awe of talent. We can look at you saying, well, wow, that is awesome. But is it inspiring? No, because it's not something we can ever attain. We don't have that. What is inspiring are people who have great signature strengths in their lives. And the most inspirational people are, in fact, those type of people. For example, Gandhi, his signature strength was that of humanness. George Washington, of honesty. Helen Keller had a love of learning. These are inspiring things for all of us. Jackie Robinson, self-control. These are signature strengths. And I'm going to list, there's 24 of them. I'm not going to list them all, but list a few. And when I do so, think about which ones you have. Don't try and have ones that you're not. But to know what you have and to be able to use those on a routine basis at work, at home, in your lives, not just for yourself, but for others. And that turns out to be the people who are the happiest and have the most gratification and the most fulfillment in life. So, example is, for example, we mentioned love of learning. Helen Keller is an example. Creativity. Thomas Edison is a perfect example of that. Someone who took his creativity and made it a signature strength. Curiosity is a signature strength. You know, you may be curious and interested in the world, and finding, you know, the opposite of being curious is being bored. Sorry about that. So, used to be an African safari guide. So, open-mindedness is a signature strength. I find that too many ideas are basically easily formed and firmly held in this world. And how much unhappiness on this planet is caused by those whose ideals are just rigid and fixed and have no sense of open-mindedness or accepting of other people, no matter how different they may look or how different they may be. Creativity and ingenuity and originality, standing out from others. You rarely do something the same as everybody else. You're always a little bit different. That is, and you strive to be different, is a signature strength. Perspective. You tend to see the bigger picture. Now, some people see the forest and some people see the trees. And a true